Ah, Angry Moderate here. June 7th, 2012. June 7th. It's summery out. We had a thunderstorm a few minutes ago. The pounding of thunder, the crack of thunder. Many people say it's the crack of lightning, but lightning is a discharge of electricity, and then the sound that follows is the crack. Anyway, let's get right to it, shall we? For June 7th, 2012. Oh, look, there I am on the side view. Yeah, okay. Stevens High School might toughen academics for athletics is one of the lead stories in today's Valley News. Stevens might toughen academics for athletes. A proposed new policy presented, nice alliteration there, a proposed new policy presented last night on eligibility requirements for sports and other extracurricular activities at Stevens High School sets more rigorous academic standards, but also allows students to stay eligible by raising their grades with extra help. The school board approved the policy 5-1 on the first reading and needs to approve a second reading, probably June 20th, before it is adopted. And then we get the quote, the obligatory quote from the superintendent, Middleton McGoodwin. There's a nice Jewish name for you. Middleton McGoodwin. Yeah, on my side of the family, from Russia and Lithuania, we have the McGoodwins. Anyway, Middleton McGoodwin says, the intent is not to be punitive, the intent is to help. What I think, since you're watching, and maybe you care, and maybe you don't, but is that Middleton McGoodwin just wants his job. Middleton McGoodwin, the superintendent of the school district of Claremont, gets paid somewhere between $75,000 and $125,000 a year, and he wants a job. So Middleton McGoodwin plays the middle ground. It's not meant to be punitive, it's meant to help. Translation, I just want to keep my job. I like the income, so I'm not going to do anything that raises anybody's, ire, right? Because that's nowadays, to a great extent, what academic administrators do. They try their very best to play all of the middle grounds to make sure that all of the constituencies and all of the stakeholders are happy or at least content so they can keep their jobs. Now, you might say that that's a somewhat cynical view on the part of the Angry Moderate, but in this day and age, it's true. People are just trying to keep their jobs. Look, in this economic climate, I don't blame the guy. I don't blame Middleton McGoodwin. It is a great name, isn't it? I don't blame Middleton McGoodwin for being political. He wants to keep his job. In this economy, who wouldn't want to keep their job? I'm often astounded when I see people leaving jobs that pay $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year. I'm like, wow, how are you doing that? That's pretty amazing. So when I read stuff like this, and Middleton McGoodwin makes Middleton McGoodwin, wow, quite a name. When he says the intent is not to be punitive, it's meant to help. Oh, look, he goes on to say the goal is not to have I don't know the guy, so I can't parody him. The goal is not to have students become ineligible because of academics, says McGoodwin. If you are not doing well academically, we are not going to wait for you to fail. I mean, come on. It's sound bites. That's what we get. Look, it used to be, you know this, right? I'm going to tell you something that you already know, and you're going to say, Dan, we know that. You're not telling us anything new, for crying out loud. It used to be that there were no academic administrators, per se. Back in the old days, there was a master teacher, right? The master teacher was the teacher who had the longest tenure at an institution, and he or she served as the leader of the institution based upon their teaching experience. And they still taught. They didn't sit behind a desk, and deal with disgruntled parents. They were still teachers, but they were the master teacher, the headmaster of the school. And some independent schools have tried to maintain a semblance of that model where a headmaster might teach a class or two. But really what administrators do now is they deal with legal issues, they deal with special education issues, and they try to raise money. So to a great extent, the majority of academic administrators are no longer educators, they are bureaucrats. Is that good or bad? I don't know. You want me, the angry moderate, who has no idea what's good and what's bad, to tell you what's good and what's bad? I don't know. Is it good or is it bad that academic administrators are mostly bureaucrats and no longer educators? I don't know. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's great to have high school principals who sit behind their desk all day long and push papers around and make all kinds of bureaucratic decisions and don't get involved in the educational process. Maybe that's great. Maybe that's really good for education. Maybe it's not. Maybe what would be really good for education would be for schools to be run by the teachers. Now, here's what happens, right? Everybody's a capitalist. Let's face it. Brianna, everybody's trying to make a buck. And here's what happens. So you get people like Richard Dufour, total charlatan, right? Cheese whiz, this guy. But Richard Dufour comes up with this idea. He's like, yeah, how can I capitalize on the fact that teachers are very egocentric? That's not the right word. They're very forward-thinking. That's not the right term either. They're very powerful, like empowered. The words are wrong, but they want to be involved in the decision-making of a school. They don't want this decision simply being made by a bureaucrat sitting behind a desk. How do I, this is Richard Dufour, how do I capitalize on this? Oh, I'm going to come up with something called, let's see, some kind of school model where, professional learning communities. Ooh, did you see that? That spittle? That was gross, sorry. Professional learning communities, okay? So professional learning communities, I know this because I worked in schools. I was a high school principal, really bad at it, by the way. Oh, big fail. Tell you about that sometime. But professional learning communities is this thing that Richard Dufour came up with, and he wrote a book about it, where teachers serve as leaders of the school in combination with and in cooperation with the administration. Do you think Richard Dufour really cares? He came up with a great idea. He wrote the book, and he goes around talking to everybody making money. Come on. Come on, Mr. Dufour. You know it's true. You don't really care what's happening in the schools. You just want people using your program because it makes you money. And then when you apply for jobs as a school administrator, which I did up until a few years ago, I would apply for principal jobs, and I got a couple of interviews there. You have to use buzzwords. You have to say things like, well, I'm a great supporter of professional learning communities, blah, 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 blah. It's just trying to get a job. Really what's going through your head at that time is, here's what's coming out of my mouth. I'm a big supporter of professional learning communities. I like the model of teachers being involved, la, 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 la. But what's really going on in my head is, just hire me. I want the $75,000 a year. I'll do a pretty good job. I'll be a reasonable principal. I won't get in the way of the teachers. I'll let them do their thing because gosh knows I probably don't know any better than they do how to reach the kids. I'll do I'll push the papers around, and I'll try and keep the parents happy, and I'll try and keep the school board happy. Just hire me. I need the money. But I'm not going to be here 7 days a week. I'm not going to be one of those principals who comes in on Sunday morning. Gotta do the work. But what's coming out of the mouths of those of us who interview for those jobs are all of these buzz terms. Here's another good buzz term in the world of education that was capitalized on because we're all capitalists, aren't we, Brianna? Aren't we, Jerry? We're all just trying to make a buck. Here's what this Carol something or other, Carol Wilkinson, Carol somebody, I can't remember her last name, came up with this thing called differentiated instruction. Now, differentiated instruction is when you have a classroom full of 30 kids, and they're all at different learning levels, and you're supposed to create an academic program that works for every child. We reach every child in our school. Our goal as educators is to reach the child who is less motivated and the child who is very motivated. The child who is a concrete learner and the child who is an abstract learner. And even if they're all in the same classroom, by gosh, we're going to reach them all. And so this woman, Carol something or other, can't remember her last name and probably better off for it, came up with this idea. She says, I'm going to capitalize. I have to get a higher voice. I'm going to capitalize on this. I'm going to make myself some money. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to come up with some idea where, differentiated instruction. And she writes a couple of books and she speaks in front of people and she's very eloquent and says, we must reach all of the children in our classrooms, la 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 la. And everybody buys into it. Everybody drinks the Kool-Aid. And everybody in education's walking around going, differentiated instruction, differentiated instruction. It's like that scene in Being John Malkovich when everybody's going, Malkovich, 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 Malkovich. Great movie. But it's baloney. First of all, how, if you're an educator out there, how, with a classroom of 25 kids, if you don't have 9 classroom aides, are you going to reach everybody? Are you kidding me? What? And, of course, if you're trying to reach everybody, you're hitting the middle. And the people who are kind of on the, on the fringes there are maybe falling off the table a little bit. And the kids, here's what teachers do now, right? The kids who are the higher end, well, we'll have the kids who are really advanced helping the kids who aren't so advanced. Oh, that's good. So, look, we have no idea what we're doing. But the people who are creating these programs, the people who are creating professional learning communities or creating, differentiated instruction, they know what they're doing. They're trying to make money. They're trying to capitalize on our inability to see that that's what they're doing. I bet you Richard Dufour has a vacation house at Loon, and every winter he's skiing down the slopes, shushing down the slopes going, I made money on all those public school systems because they bought the potion, and I'm so smart, and they... Because professional learning communities? I have an idea. Instead of calling it professional learning communities, let's just get rid of administrators. How's that? Let's get rid of principals and let's get rid of superintendents and let's have the teachers run the schools. And if the parents come and are like, whoop, 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 oh, be quiet. Teachers are working hard to educate your lovely and yet possibly snot-nosed child. Be quiet. Teachers are here from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, working as hard as they can, coming up with ideas to reach your kids. And you're in here yapping left and right about how, the education system is failing the children. No, it's not. You are. It's not the teachers. It's the parents. It's the communities that fail their children. Anyway, I'm tired. The angry moderate is tired. And you know what? The coffee isn't even helping, but today I brought Tootsie Rolls. I'm going to have one right now. I love Tootsie Rolls. You know why? Reminds me of being young. Great stuff. Now, you get to listen to me eat a Tootsie Roll. And if you don't want to listen to me eat a Tootsie Roll, I don't care. I'm going to eat it anyway. Look, and pretend I chew tobacco. All right? I used to do that. Put lots of gum in my mouth. I have a big wad of gum and spit. Because I chewed tobacco once or twice. I got totally sick. Stuff's disgusting. How people can chew tobacco is totally beyond me. Just a pinch between your cheek and gum give you good tobacco pleasure. No, it doesn't. It gives you canker sores the size of nickels, and it deforms your face, and then you get really dizzy and you throw up and fall down. Good tobacco pleasure. Oh, shut up. Tootsie Roll. You hear the train? Anyway, I gotta finish this now, see? No, there's one problem with Tootsie Rolls. You have to chew them for a long time. Unlike fancy chocolate that melts in your mouth, you know? This doesn't melt in your mouth because it's mostly made out of plastic, which is underestimated as a food source, by the way. Plastic? Have you ever taken a six-pack of soda and ripped off like the little plastic things and eaten the plastic? Oh, fantastic. Dip it in salsa. That's great stuff. Okay, finish the Tootsie Roll. That was, yeah. Anyway, nothing wrong with chocolate, nothing wrong with coffee. Anyone ever tells you that there's something wrong with chocolate and coffee is either a fascist, number one, or is someone that you need to avoid at all possible cost, because there's nothing wrong with chocolate and coffee. Zero, nothing. If I had a bleeding ulcer and they said to me, you can't drink coffee, I'd be like, oh yes I can. I will mix it with my Pepto-Bismol. I will have coffee and Pepto-Bismol together. I'll be like, Pepto-Bismol, French roast. And by the way, there's a business idea right there. If you're listening and you take my business idea, I want kickback. Come up with an antacid, like Pepto-Bismol, some kind of, but that tastes like coffee. Oh, Brianna, what do you think? Yep, thumbs up, see? And like all of us, Brianna is a capitalist. She's trying to make money, so we're going to figure this business thing out, right? What about all medicines that you Motrin, liquid Motrin, tastes like coffee and has caffeine in it. Ooh. All right, anyway, yeah, that's a business idea. So, back to this stuff about Stevens High School and Middleton McGoodwin. I got to meet this guy. Hey, Mr. McGoodwin, you want to come on the show? I just want you on the show here so that I can say your name many times, right? Frankly, I have no interest in what you have to say, probably about anything. I mean, unless it's, about soccer or maybe about weather. Like if you like thunderstorms, I'll talk to you about those. But about education, a big yawn. Because you would come on my show, and all you would do is you would play the middle ground and you'd try not to alienate anybody. You would sit here and every word that came out of your mouth would be calculated. In the back of your brain you'd be saying, don't mess up, don't say something wrong. And out of your mouth would be coming all these very careful words. That's why all of our political figures are very careful when they speak. And that's why Joe Biden, our vice president, isn't allowed to speak. Because he has no filter, so he says what's on his mind, which I like, by the way. I like Joe Biden. I like politicians who just kind of, whoops, shouldn't have said that, should I? Boy, that's going to be trouble. How are we going to cover that one? I like those guys. Republicans and Democrats. I like the politicians who just, out it comes. And you're like, ooh, that was a good one. Whoa. I wonder what he was going to do about that one. I like that. Anyway, so this guy, Middleton McGoodwin, who's talking about toughening academics for athletes. First of all, what? And this is some big revelation? Hey, we have a great idea. Let's make school more important than sports. No, really? Yeah. Holy cow, are you kidding me? No, isn't that a revelation? Right? Because we know that all of the athletes at Stevens High School are going to go on to have careers in athletics. Again, it's not just Stevens High School, of course, right? All of the high schools in the Upper Valley, all of them, how many athletes will make a living as professional athletes? 7? 7? What, Nick Alexander, right? Isn't he a skier? Don't we hear about him from Lebanon? He's a professional skier. Hannah Carney, professional skier, right? These are people who will make a living. That's about the end of the list. I can't think of anybody else. Can you think of it? Do we have any professional soccer players making $100,000 a year who grew up in Grafton? I can't think of anybody, right? I coach soccer. I coach lots of players in soccer. Very few of them are going to make a living playing soccer. Many of them will have wonderful high school careers where academics will hopefully be more important than sports. What a revelation. Hey, let's make learning more important than kicking a ball. No, kicking a ball is much more important than learning mathematics. No. Silliness. Anyway, the Valley News, what a great news source. A lot of people rag on the Valley News and say, oh yeah, I like the Valley News. There's nothing wrong with the Valley News. I get what I need to see, right? I like to see what's going on locally. I like to read the letters to the editor written by the local folks, what they're kind of thinking. So all of you out there who kind of give the Valley News a hard time, lighten up. Anyway, I was reading things here in the New York Times, one of our national newspapers, and there was an op-ed. You know what an op-ed is, right? Now, there are many of you out there who are going, op-ed, op-ed, op-ed. I don't know what an op-ed is. Well, you see, here you have the back pages of the New York Times. So here's the New York Times. And if you open to the back page of the front section, you have the editorial section, and then you have the page that's opposite the editorial section, op-ed. Oh, all right. And on the op-ed page, you have opinion pieces written by the most senior thinkers in America. Now, first of all, I hope that I am never, and I don't even have to worry about this one, right? Weintraub, senior thinker, not so much, right? But so this idea of people being the most important intellectual minds, the intellects, the experts, I don't buy it. Anyway, so they write pieces. So this guy, John Nagel, wrote a piece called The Age of Unsatisfying Wars. And this Memorial Day, President Obama recognized veterans of all of the nation's wars, but focused on two: the war in Iraq, which came to an end, and the war in Vietnam, which began for Americans 50 years ago. Now, first of all, that's unbelievable that the Vietnam War began 50 years ago. However, Mr. Nagel, I would argue, is wrong on that front, because historically our involvement in that part of the world that we call Vietnam began well before the Vietnam War. Those of you who, of course, know your history, which I know is all of you, you're not really, I'm going to say some things here about Vietnam, and you're like, oh, damn, I knew that. Come on, I don't need to listen to this. I could go out and kick a ball, right? Kicking a ball is more important than hearing about this crud. Here's what happened, and you know this. Of course, between 1956 and 1964, the United States supported the French in a war, what the French called that part of the world Indochina, in the first Indochina War from 56 to 64. Well, why did we do that? You're saying, no, Dan, it wasn't 56 to 64. It was 46 to 54, exactly. Just was trying to catch you there. Actually, I wasn't trying to catch you. I got my dates wrong. So here's what happened. So prior to World War II, the United States was pretty much didn't care much about what was going on in Southeast Asia. It wasn't really big on our radar screen. And during World War II, we had an enemy. The United States had an enemy in the Pacific. That was Japan, right? So when the Japanese invaded and occupied Vietnam, of course, the United States policy was to support any group that was fighting against Japanese occupation of Vietnam. So we supported, revolutionary organizations in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, and revolutionary organizations that may have believed in or had a Marxist or communist bent ideologically, but we didn't care. They could have believed in worshiping Martians, and we would want to worship Martians. They can worship anybody. All we care is that they're fighting against the Japanese. So we supported Ho Chi Minh against the Japanese. Now, in 1945, when the Japanese surrendered after the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan surrendered, Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese communists, the Marxists, got up and said, woohoo! Thank you, America. The war is over. We can now declare an independent Vietnam. We hope that you will join us and support our new independent nation. And the United States, not so fast, because now that the World War II is over, we care about the fact that you are communist or that you avow yourselves as Marxist. And therefore, we are going to now no longer support you, even though we patted you on the back and said, like Ronald Reagan used to say, the freedom fighters. We have to support the freedom fighters in Afghanistan who are fighting against the Soviet Union. Well, who were those freedom fighters? The Mujahideen, right? Who were fighting against the Soviets in Afghanistan. Who were they? They were the dudes, they were the terrorist dudes, right? They were the dudes who now are like, the war on terror. We have to fight the war on terror. Weren't these the guys that we supported back in like the 1970s? Right? 1979 and into the 1980s? Weren't these the guys who Ronald Reagan, supposedly this great conservative president, called freedom fighters? The freedom fighters in Afghanistan, fighting against the monolithic evil, those ungodly Soviets. Right? They were the freedom fighters in 1982. What happened? All of a sudden, they're no longer the freedom fighters? It's because now that the Soviet thing was done, we could hate them, right? We hated the Soviets, but we hated them more than we hated the Mujahideen. But once the Soviets were gone, we were like, oh, yeah, we can hate them now. Because, right? So, in 1946, after the war, World War II ends in 1945, it's 1946, the Vietnamese want to be independent, la 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 la, and the United States says, no, we can't support Ho Chi Minh, he's a communist, Our entire political doctrine now after the World War II is based upon the containment of communism. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Oh, and then the French chime in. We would like to have Vietnam back. It was our colony, yes? And we would like to reassert our colonial authority in Vietnam because it will make us feel good. We have been kind of embarrassed by our station recently. And the United States said, well, sounds good to us. We'll support you. So the United States turns around and supports the French. You know this. I mean, come on. Supports the French as they reoccupy Vietnam. And the United States does this to stop the spread of evil communism and that evil Ho Chi Minh, whom we supported against Japan. Once Japan had been defeated, he'd become evil. It was all of a sudden, it was like this, it was like Me, Myself, and Irene, right? The Jim Carrey movie, where on the one hand, he's like, Charlie, right? Charlie was a great guy, la 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 la. And then he's like, has that personality change, right? And he becomes, what's his name? Hank Evans, the evil, sinister guy. All of a sudden, Ho Chi Minh becomes Hank Evans, right? First he was Charlie, whose last name I can't remember, from the movie Me, Myself, and Irene, which you have to see. It's a great movie. But then he becomes like the evil, nasty, terrible alter ego, Hank Evans, right? Same guy. Ho Chi Minh, same guy in 1944 as he was in 1946. The only difference is that now that the Japanese have been defeated, the United States was like, whoa, how are we going to stop the spread of communism? Oh, the French, we will take, yes, we will. And the United States says, oh, okay, sounds good, we will support you. So the French go back into Vietnam, and they occupy Vietnam. And of course, the Vietnamese, who had fought against the Japanese for independence, had fought against the Chinese for hundreds of years for independence. Of course, the Vietnamese, led by their nationalistic leader, Ho Chi Minh, who happened to be a Marxist, but mostly just wanted an independent Vietnam, leads a revolution, or, an insurgency against, the French. Just like, many would argue, the Taliban and other people whom we're waging this war against terror against are mostly interested in just everybody leaving. Just leave. Leave. Am I sitting here saying that the Taliban is nice, that they are nice people? No. But I'm trying to point out a small amount of hypocrisy on the part of American policymakers. But I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to explain that their hypocrisy isn't hypocrisy at all. It's all very calculated. We sit there on the liberal left, people on the liberal left, and say, oh, the hypocritical government. They're not hypocrites. They know exactly what they're doing. It's very calculated. They stand up in front of cameras and they lie, but they know exactly what they're doing. Anyway, 1946 to 1954, the United States supports the French. The French are a disaster when it comes to trying to solidify their colonial enterprise, their hold on Vietnam. And in 1954, the French, in a brilliant military move, seen as one of the great strategic military moments in the history of humankind, move all of their troops to a valley in northwestern Vietnam called Dien Bien Phu. And from Dien Bien Phu, we shall sweep across Vietnam. We shall eliminate the insurgents. We shall destroy Ho Chi Minh. And the Nama accent is no longer a French accent. It is more somewhere, I cannot, maybe Spanish, so I'm losing my accent. And they lose. The French get surrounded by the Vietnamese troops. They are held under siege for months, and they surrender, and the French lose. They lose. And the United States is like, ooh, oh boy, we really blew that one. Now, some would argue that the United States made no mistake at all. They supported the French for 8 years. During that 8 years, did communism spread out of Vietnam? No, not really. So remember, everything that the United States was doing in the post-1946 period was based upon a political and military doctrine, a doctrine of containment, containing communism, keeping it in one place, or as close to one place as is possible, keeping it behind the metaphorical Iron Curtain in Europe and trying to stop the spread of communism from China southward into Vietnam and through Southeast Asia and into Hawaii, and then eventually to San Francisco and Berkeley, where of course they failed egregiously because Berkeley, California was a hotbed of communism in the 1960s, but that's for another story. So in the 1950s, throughout the 1950s, there were all kinds of games that were played with regard to the United States supporting a new South Vietnam, a new Southern government. There would be an election to reunify North and South. Baloney. There was never meant to be an election to reunify North and South that were artificially split at the Geneva Convention of 1954. Blah, 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 blah. You're sitting there and your eyes are glassing over. But you should know this. You should know this history. And here's why. Because I'm reading this article about the Vietnam War that supposedly started 50 years ago. Wrong. Our involvement in Vietnam started before World War II. That's number one. Number two, the article, this piece by John Nagel, is going to go on to say that the United States lost the Vietnam War between 1964 and our eventual departure in 1975. That the United States lost the Vietnam War. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, no, they didn't. And I'm going to have some coffee and I'm going to explain to you why. And did you hear that little noise? That was like, I have a sore tooth. I bit my tongue earlier this week, so I have like a sore place on my tongue and next to my tooth. And so sometimes I make a funny noise because it hurts. I'm sure that was important to you. Do you hate that, though, biting your tongue when you're having, you're eating your pad thai and food is great? And then you're like, right? And then you're like, oh, I gotta get a napkin. Is there blood? And then you get the napkin and you're dabbing your tongue. You're like, oh, the blood. It hurts. Anyway. Here's my argument. Oh, I forgot to have the coffee. Forgetting to have coffee. That's craziness, right? The doctrine in 1964, when the United States became militarily directly involved in Vietnam, not with advisors like it was during the Kennedy administration, but with the start of a military operation called Rolling Thunder, a big bombing campaign against North Vietnam that was precipitated by the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Incident? Brianna's like, wait, which camp? The Gulf of Tonkin incident, where a couple of little Vietnamese PT boats supposedly attacked the USS Maddox, a big warship. And Lyndon Johnson's like, we cannot stand for these kinds of attacks against U.S. blah, 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 right? And the Congress is like, yeah, right? It's like that scene in Blazing Saddles. Right? Not only am I happy that these people got to hear Gabby Johnson and that genuine frontier gibberish, right? That's what all the congressmen and women do now. When a congressperson gets up and makes a speech, the congress people go, right? If you haven't seen Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks, you've made a mistake. Anyway, so 1964, the United States gets involved militarily in the Vietnam War under the umbrella of a doctrine of containment, containing communism. And for 11 years, the United States wages war in Vietnam, and some 55,000 American soldiers and other personnel die in Vietnam, and over 1 million, it's estimated, Vietnamese die in Vietnam during this 11 years. And many people say in 1975, as the American embassy in South Vietnam is attacked, and we're airlifting our last troops out, etc. And people look back and say that we lost the Vietnam War. The United States, that was our first loss. No, it wasn't. And you're sitting there saying, Dan, are you taking license here and rewriting history with the the thing on the side of your tongue, ouch, where you bit your tongue? Did biting the tongue actually precipitate some sort of mutation, mutagenic process in your brain? And all of a sudden, no. What was the goal? Now, is it raining out? Oh, man, I have soccer practices. I do not want to practice in the rain. What was the goal? The stated goal on the part of the American administration was win the war, because the stated goal always has to be win the war, right? George Bush, right? George Bush in Iraq. We will win the war in Iraq, right? Barack Obama. We will bring our troops home from Afghanistan and we will have won the war, right? Every president talks about winning the war. We will have won the war. We're going to win the war. Because you can't say to the American people, we are going to send your sons and daughters off to a foreign land. We're really not trying to win. We just want to slow things down a little. So your children are going to be in harm's way, and our goal is not to win. It would be nice, but we know it's not going to happen. Our goal is just to get our foot in the door and slow things down. You can't say that, can you? If you're a politician, you can't say that. You're not going to get elected on the not the win the war platform, but the wage the war and hope things go okay platform. But for 11 years, the United States fought a war in Vietnam. And did communism spread throughout Southeast Asia during that 11 years? Bueller? No. No. Cambodia? Yes. And the Khmer Rouge? Yes. Laos? Yes. Some influence in Laos? Yes. Malaysia? No. Singapore? No. Did communism spread throughout Southeast Asia between 1964 and 1975? Was the Southeast Asian peninsula, Thailand? No. Taken over by no. Was communism contained during that 11 years? Yes. Are you now, it would be fairly unpopular for someone to claim that the war in Vietnam was a victory. I mean, considering how it destroyed the fabric of our society, how it was fought based entirely upon lies, right? General William Westmoreland, right? We're winning the war, right? Right. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, yeah, right. Yeah. Hardy har har. So, to make the claim that the Vietnam War was a success, that we actually won that war, would be hard to defend in some ways. But I'm making the point that it was an 11-year war fought under the umbrella of a doctrine of containment, containing communism. I feel I'm sitting here in this small chair and I'm like, la 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 la. Don't have the table to protect me from you. Help! So I would make the argument that the Vietnam War was, from a policy standpoint, a success. The policy was containment of communism. Did it work? Yes. Do I support the Vietnam War? No, that's not my point. My point is, from a purely political, doctrinal standpoint, it worked. Now, so you are out there saying, oh, Weintraub liked the Vietnam War. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that policymakers behind closed doors, if you listen to their little conversations, hello, Scotty, are you ready? What are you saying back there behind closed doors? That they would say, well, yeah, it's kind of successful. Communism didn't spread during those 11 years. And then they would say, well, was it worth the sacrifice? And I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a subjective calculus, isn't it? You don't know. So there are a lot of people who look at the Iraq War and say the Iraq War was a failure. Oh, it was fought under false premises, weapons of mass destruction. Yeah, of course. But there wasn't. You understand that George Bush didn't really think there were weapons. You know that was just like a way to get the American people to say, rah, 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 let's do it, yeah. Weapons of mass destruction, yeah. Saddam, yeah, let's go, yeah, right? Rah, rah, rah. Was the Iraq War a success? I don't know. What was the goal? Has the Afghanistan War been a success? Well, I don't know. What was the goal? Okay. What was the new doctrine that was articulated by George Bush in the wake of 9/11? It was the doctrine of, survey says, preemption. The doctrine of containment was our doctrine with regard to the Cold War and communism. The doctrine of preemption was this idea of preempting another attack on the United States. Has there been a major attack on the United States by terrorists or whomever since 2001? No. Based upon that calculus, that paradigm, have the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan been a success? Yes. Do I support the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? Not the issue. Do you really care if I support the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? Does it mean anything to you if whether or not I support the wars? I'll tell you what I don't support. I don't support how blind people become in their patriotic fervor. I don't support that. I know that politicians lie to me. I mean, I'm not dumb. I know that when politicians make pleas, they're trying to trigger my rear brain, my reactive brain, my primitive brain. Did you see that? Do you see me swallow there? That's because where I bit my tongue, right? So, ow, it really hurts. I know that they're trying to do that to me. I know that they're trying to get me to respond. And I know that over 50% of the American population, for some reason, I don't know, is it because they go to Walmart all the time? Or is it because they eat McDonald's and it makes you not so smart and you eat McDonald's and you can't use your front brain? Maybe McDonald's jingle shouldn't be like, I don't even know what McDonald's jingle is now, right? 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and it'll help you not really be able to think very clearly. I don't know. Is it when you eat a lot of fatty foods that you no longer are able to reason? And when a politician says to you, weapons of mass destruction, you go, "Rah!" And they say, we have to go, "Rah!" I don't, maybe. But from a policy standpoint, I'm just talking about from a policy. I know that the politicians are liars. Come on, you know that. You know that. But from a policy standpoint, have the Iran and Iraq wars been successful based upon this doctrine of preemption, preempting an attack on the United States? Yes, they have. Excuse me, did you hear that? My stomach grumbling? So, what's my point today? Weintraub, what's your point today? I have I'm just kind of rambling on here. They watch and I ramble, right? What's my point? My point is that people are lacking the ability sometimes to know what's really going on. This guy, what's his name? I love this guy. And, I'd love to take you out to dinner, Middleton McGoodwin, if only to be able to say your name. This is my friend, Middleton McGoodwin. He will have the nori tofu with extra soy sauce. Wouldn't you like that, Middleton McGoodwin? So this guy, Middleton McGoodwin, the superintendent of the Claremont schools, he's not arguing one way or another with regard to what he believes in, academics or athletics. All he's trying to do is keep his job. You know that. Come on. All he's trying to do is keep his $75,000 to $100,000 a year salary. That's all he wants. You know that. And all of these politicians who make these claims with regard to not the ideological predisposition with regard to the battles that we fought, Vietnam, but just the basic ideas of, was the Vietnam War a success or was it a failure? Well, based upon the basic doctrine of containment, it was a total success. Does that mean that someone has to say that it was a good thing? No. But you know that when politicians get up in front of the camera and make speeches, they are purposefully trying to get you to feel something. They want you to use your rear brain, your reactive brain. They want to pull at certain emotions and make you feel something and stop thinking. They don't want you to use your ability to reason. They want you to react. You know that. You know that Middleton McGoodwin and most other academic administrators are most concerned with what? Their paychecks! Do I blame them for that? No! If I was making $100,000 a year, I would make darn sure that I kept everybody kind of happy. Yeah, but Dan, you're a bit of a sellout. Yes! Exactly! Don't you see? Yeah, but Dan, you'd be marginalizing your own values. Exactly! For my $12,000 a month? Marginalize away! What would I do with that money? Why? Do a lot of cool things with my family, for my retirement, for my kids' futures. Yeah, right? Come on, guys. You know that because if academic administrators weren't simply pushing papers and trying to keep their jobs, they wouldn't exist. You know why? Because they would stand up for what they believed was right and they'd get fired. That's what would happen. Academic administrators would stand up and they'd say, oh, no, you guys are totally wrong. You school board is totally you are wrong, or the parents are, and they would be like, fired. Because academic administrators, principals, and superintendents who stand up for what they believe in, they lose their jobs. When you see a principal who's been at a job for 30 years or a superintendent, they're really good at playing the field, like they're really good at politics. They're politicians. Is that bad? No. Why isn't it bad? Because they're trying to keep their jobs. Fine with me. Doctrine of employment, says Weintraub. Not doctrine of containment, not doctrine of preemption, doctrine of employment. And on that note, everybody, the angry moderate who is not feeling angry at all today, feeling invigorated, will leave you with this thought and this final thought. And Bob will agree with me, because Bob always agrees with me. Chocolate and coffee. These things don't lie. See ya.